So do you know how much private school tuition increased in Indiana after their private school voucher bill passed?
Inflation,
So what was the
about
percentage?
inflation,
Which is what?
3% on average over
You think it was
4 years.
3%?
Yes.
Tuition went up 25%
That's not true.
after that state passed their voucher program. So back to you, Ms. Colangelo. So is there anything in this school voucher bill that prevents a private school from raising their tuition for all students after the bill passes?
Yes, the majority of the families are full-pay families, and they have to consider those families that have been dedicated to that school before this bill is even contemplated and make sure that.
Let me rephrase the question and clarify. Is there anything in this school voucher bill that prevents a private school from raising their tuition after the bill passes?
There's careful language to protect the autonomy of private schools, so the operations will stay the same, and they will consider all families in their school when
just wanna
they
make sure
make those decisions. I know what you're trying to say, but I'm trying to say is that the private schools will continue to operate the way they do and respect those families that have been a part of the community for all this time.
So can we just agree that there is nothing in this?
It's not explicit in this bill,
Okay,
but it's
that's
the way
helpful.
that things will operate.
That's helpful. Explicit in the law is what counts. Otherwise, it's called a loophole. Here in Texas, under this bill, since there's no mechanism stopping a private school from raising tuition higher than necessary, what I'm worried about is in other states that have tried vouchers, what you tend to see is that it's either or. Either a private school says we don't want to participate in this program for whatever reason, or a private school tends to have all of their students, or a majority, 85% of their students receiving a voucher. So you tend to either have private schools with most of the kids on a voucher or no voucher at all. I know the chairman mentioned earlier that there may not be, or most students in a private school won't get the voucher. That's not what we see in other states. Either jump into the voucher program with both feet or you don't participate at all. What I'm worried about is because there's no income cap limit, because there's so many barriers to the kids who are getting priority, and I'm worried those kids won't be able to actually get enrolled, that if we end up in a situation like we see in other states where most of the voucher money is going to kids who are already in private school, and on the wealthier side, maybe not wealthy, but wealthier than average families here in Texas, that what you're going to see is a private school where a lot of the kids or most of the kids are getting the voucher, raising tuition by maybe not the full $10,000, but $5,000. So their families are getting a $5K discount at our expense, and then the private school is able to kind of reap the profits of the $5,000 they're getting from the voucher. Is there anything in this bill that would stop that from happening?
There's no scenario, this bill is limited by the $1 billion appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking about maybe 80,000 students statewide. So the contemplated in this bill, in reality for the next 2 years, there's no scenario where a school is going to fill all of their seats with an ESA student and be able to raise tuition in the way that you're contemplating right now.
Okay, so the current analysis says that it's a majority of the kids are going to be kids already in private school.
I'm not sure where that came from. Was that from the
fiscal note?
Fiscal
Yes.
note? So those are assumptions that are made. There's no proof that that is what's going to happen.
Well, fiscal notes are how we make decisions about a bill's impact here. But regardless, so whether it's in this biennium, whether it's in a future biennium, whether that legislative appropriation is increased in future years, as we've seen in every other state, a voucher may start small, but it grows session after session. We've seen that here in Texas with things like our charter school system, which I think is vastly better than private school vouchers, but we have seen it grow when it started out small. So my point is, we get to a situation where St. John's, St. Mark's, St. Stephen's here in Austin, those parents, because all the priority categories, those kids couldn't get accepted to St. John's, or they couldn't get accepted to a private school, or they don't have a private school in their area. We get to a point where many students at that school are receiving taxpayer subsidies for their tuition bill. And then the private school is able to raise tuition and pocket that money.
The schools you referenced are the schools that have very robust endowment, that have incredible financial aid for students. They will likely be the later adopters of a program like this. It's the schools that don't have those incredible endowments to provide the diversity of student experience and fund those students that want a program like this to offer more opportunities for more students in Texas.
Do you know what the average tuition is at St. John's?
The average tuition at St. John's, not off the top of my head. It's probably, we're getting 27, 28.
30,000?
Okay.
Do you think any voucher money should ever go to subsidize a parent who's sending their kid to St. John's?
If St.
Now or
John's
in the
decides
future?
to participate in the program,
So if St. John's decided to take free taxpayer money, you think it's okay for those families attending the most elite private school in the state to get taxpayer funds?
if the family is prioritized and they're low income and need the ESA in order to attend St. John's, and St. John's participates in the program, then that's what we're talking
But
about.
part of the priority is Category 4, which are people with no disabilities, no income limit, the St. John's families.
If there's funding left over, which the reality of that happening is very low, if we get through all the other priority categories.
But we already just walked through how the other priority categories have significant barriers to being admitted or finding a private school that can serve their needs. And we walked through how the other states, the vast majority of the money, 95%, 89% are going to the kids who are already in private school. It would just be helpful, at least when we're having this conversation, to at least agree that the St. John's families, the people making $500,000 a year, they should never touch these taxpayer funds. Like, if we get to that point, hopefully we could all agree that should go to teacher pay raises in our Texas public schools. If we could agree on that, I think we could have a much more productive conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.